Hello science fans, my name is Shona and I'm your resident Filipina scientist. Welcome to another episode of SHE-ensya's Corner, where we kick back, relax, and talk about science events that are fun, exciting, or sometimes even scary in the life of your resident Filipina scientist. So last week, my research team and I were in Gubat, Sorsogon for a workshop on mangrove crab technologies with DOST-PCAAARRD. We were there to talk about Crabbier, a free mobile application that our team created in order to help identify the species of juvenile mangrove crabs. But as we went through the discussions for today, I was overwhelmed by the generosity of our participants. While we were talking about our technologies, they also shared a lot about their traditional and local practices in Gubat, Sorsogon. And soon enough, after the workshop was over, they invited us into their homes, into their mangrove crab ponds, and in that same night, they even took us out to sea to capture some aliens. Now, the aliens in this case were what we call crab megalopa, which are early developmental stages. And this is a phase in the mangrove crab's life cycle where the organism is still translucent and it really looks strange, and that's why the locals called it alien. So my research adventures have taken me from the forest to the farm, from rivers to oceans. And as I studied all of these amazing ecosystems, there was one lesson that I took to heart. And it is that all the research and innovations that we're trying to create would not mean much if we do not support and are supported by the communities that are living in these areas. These people are very critical to the research that we're doing because they are, after all, the primary stakeholders and caretakers of the environments that we are studying. And this is true whether we're studying a farm or a forest. It's true whether we're studying a river or even a city. But I really have a soft spot for the ocean. The Philippines is blessed with a rich marine biodiversity. We are, after all, the home of the center of marine biodiversity. Now, based on my research as an archipelago, we have bays and coastal waters covering an area of 266,000 square kilometers, and oceanic waters covering 1,934,000 square kilometers. And so, with our 36,289 kilometers of coastline, it is not surprising that our country supports more than 3% of its population in the fisheries sector. And right now, the fisheries sector is valued at 302.83 billion pesos. The fisheries sector, however, is beset with a lot of challenges, including unsustainable fishing practices and climate change. And I believe that's where science and technology comes in. We can develop practical technologies that can help our fishers and farmers maximize their limited capital, increase their productivity, while at the same time protect the environment. We can also aid our environmental managers in recording and observing their ecosystems, while at the same time pushing for more sustainable practices in the local communities. We have put in a lot of work in developing technologies that can help achieve sustainability in our coastal communities. However, I've also seen a lot of them fail. Not because of the inherent design of the technology themselves, but because of how people perceive these technologies. This perspective is shaped by how, in my 12 years as a scientist, I've mostly worked with fishers and farmers throughout the country, and I've observed how their attitudes have shaped the acceptance or rejection of different innovations that scientists have developed. I've been studying mangrove crabs since 2012. I started out as a research associate and PhD student in the lab of Dr. Menchi Lagman from the De La Salle University. We wanted to study the population genetics of alimango, which is basically the detection of genetic connections between the different wild populations of alimango in the Philippines. The logic behind that is that if something happens to a population of alimango and there are other populations that are connected to it, whatever happens here can affect all the other connected populations. But as I was traveling around the Philippines, I realized that our fishers have another problem, and this was in the species identification of juveniles. You see, we have 3 of the 4 species of alimango in the Philippines. But out of that 3, only 1, locally known as the bulik, or with the scientific name of Sila serrata, is preferred because of its larger adult sizes and faster growth rates. Now, because fishers can't identify the species of juveniles, they have a tendency to overstock their ponds, which stresses out their limited resources while at the same time also harming our environment. No! So, this led our team to use a molecular approach in order to develop a non-molecular approach in species identification for juvenile mangrove crabs. This technique has actually been patented and even won the DOST-PCAARRD's Outstanding Research and Development Award for Emerging Technology last 2015. We're pretty proud of it. But with the help, of course, of the College of Computer Studies of De La Salle University, this method was eventually transformed into the free mobile application called Crabbier. What it does is it uses convolutional neural networks in order to connect the shape of the shell of the crab to its species. So a convolutional neural network is a computer algorithm that's often used in image recognition. It can eventually learn and detect differences in physical features that it sees in photos, videos, or even live feeds. So for the past 3 years, our crab tech team has been busy deploying this application to different fishing communities all over the Philippines. We've been very lucky that these communities have received us very, very warmly and have provided constructive comments on how we can better improve the application. Now, a lot of them have observed that the app is best suited for traders in order for them to confirm the species of the crablets that they are selling, and also for people who are just starting out their mangrove crab farm to make sure that they are not scammed in the process. But in our journeys, we have received many requests and additional feedback in order for us to help out in some of the other problems encountered by our fishers. As I've mentioned before, I've seen many well-intentioned and well-designed technologies fail upon deployment. And it's not because of a bad design, but because of the rejection of the communities that they are trying out to help. Now, in some cases, the problems arise because our country, maybe even the world, has fostered a culture that distrusts science. Misinformation and fake news are everywhere, and some members of society would prefer believing social media posts over the feedback from scientists themselves. Our community, the STEM community, can feel alien to some of our stakeholders because of our tendency to speak in technical terms. And whether we would like to admit it or not, we also have a tendency to speak as if we know all the answers, when the reality is we don't. And because of this tendency, we can sometimes be viewed as elitist or even arrogant. And that's why I think science communication is important, because it allows us to create relationships with the communities that we are trying to work with. After all, modern interventions can only go so far. And we have to accept the fact that a lot of the answers to our sustainability problems already exist. And perhaps they are best known by the people who have grown and lived intimately with our lands and our oceans. And so our team has transitioned to become custodians of traditional practices of our mangrove crab growers and fishers. We listen to their stories, we watch their practices, and whenever we can, we try to replicate them in the lab and try to validate their effectiveness. And beyond learning so much about our culture, our traditions, the amazing traditional scientists that we have, I think one of the key lessons here is that in order for us scientists to be heard, we have to first listen to the communities that we are trying to help. We have to make them feel seen, we have to make them feel heard, and we have to be able to recognize the existing contributions that they've already made to the field that we are trying to study. So yeah, I'm still processing a lot of the new information that I learned from Gubat Sorsogon. But I'm quite excited to say that a version of this video is actually part of a plenary talk that I delivered during the DLSU Research Congress. So you can check out their website if you want to watch the video or the recording of that presentation. So our research ventures are currently at a state of limbo while we're waiting for new budgets to come in, while we're waiting for go signals to defend new proposals, and while we're waiting to figure out our schedules. So after this, I'll be going back to checking some papers and computing grades for my students because it's the end of term at De La Salle University. Don't hesitate to put in the comments what you want to learn more about the life of a Filipina scientist here in the Philippines. If you want to ask questions, science questions, ocean questions, anything to do with molecular biology, biotechnology, and ecology, I would love to hear those questions and I would love to help you answer them. So again, thank you very much for hanging out with me and I hope to see you around.